When people hear that someone is worth $1 billion, they almost always imagine one thing: a giant bank vault stuffed with stacks of cash. It's the fantasy image we've all seen in movies: billionaires swimming in money, vaults overflowing with $100 bills, private jets fueled by endless piles of cash. But here's the truth no one talks about. Billionaires don't actually sit on $1 billion in liquid money. Not even close. In fact, most of them would struggle to pull together even 5% of their net worth in cash if you demanded it tomorrow. Why? Because net worth is not the same thing as cash. Net worth is the paper value of everything they own: stocks, real estate, private companies, art collections, yachts, even the value of the brand tied to their name. Cash? That's liquid, spendable, transferable. The money you can actually use in the real world without selling something. And that's where the myth begins to crack. Take Elon Musk, for example. The world's richest man on paper, often swinging between 200 and 250 billion in net worth. But how much cash does Elon actually keep lying around? At one point, during his Twitter takeover, it became clear he didn't have anywhere near 44 billion in liquid money. He had to borrow against Tesla stock, liquidate shares, and raise funds just to get the deal done. That's the first shock. Being worth 200 billion doesn't mean you have 200 billion. It means if you sold everything you own, in theory, you might end up with that much. But only if buyers were willing to pay that price. And only if the market didn't collapse the second you dumped it all. Which raises the real question: how much cash does a billionaire actually keep on hand? The answer varies, but studies and leaks suggest it's often less than people think. A typical billionaire might keep somewhere between 1% to 5% of their net worth in actual cash or cash-like assets. That means a 1 billion billionaire could have as little as 10 million in liquid money. For the average person, that still sounds astronomical. But think about the scale. It's a fraction. It's like someone worth 100 only keeping 10 in their checking account. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Why wouldn't billionaires keep more cash? Why not sit on a mountain of liquidity and truly live like Scrooge McDuck in his vault? Because cash, in the billionaire world, is considered dead weight. It doesn't grow. It doesn't multiply. It doesn't build empires. Money has to be working in stocks, companies, and assets that appreciate. That's why billionaires park their wealth in everything, from real estate portfolios to tech companies, from rare art to private equity. The less cash, the better, as long as they have enough to keep their lifestyle running. But here's the kicker: that strategy comes with fragility. Because if markets crash, if liquidity dries up, suddenly billionaires can find themselves asset-rich but cash-poor. And history shows us that's exactly how some of the wealthiest people alive have stumbled. Think about it. On paper, they're untouchable. They own skyscrapers, fleets of jets, massive companies. But the moment they need hard cash, they're forced to sell. When they sell, the empire starts bleeding. This is the untold truth of billionaire wealth. It looks invincible, but in reality, it's often more fragile than we think. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Because if you follow the paper trail, you start to realize the way billionaires hold their wealth isn't just about money. It's about control. It's about power. It's about keeping themselves untouchable even when their vaults are emptier than you'd ever expect. Here's something that might surprise you. Most billionaires don't even keep their cash the way you and I do. There's no checking account with $1 billion balance. There's no dusty vault guarded by men in suits with earpieces. Instead, billionaire liquidity hides in something far more strategic: cash equivalents. What does that mean? Treasury bills, money market funds, short-term bonds, assets that can be turned into spendable cash in a heartbeat. But here's the key: even those are just temporary holding cells. The moment they stack up, that money usually gets redeployed into something else. Because billionaires hate idle money. Think of it like this: if you're worth $1 billion and inflation is running at 5%, every year you sit on cash, you're losing 50 million in real value. That's more than most people could earn in several lifetimes. So instead, they chase growth. Some stash wealth inside their companies. Jeff Bezos, for instance, has the majority of his fortune tied directly to Amazon stock. Mark Zuckerberg, same with Meta. Warren Buffett, he sits on a mountain of Berkshire Hathaway shares. Their wealth isn't liquid, it's paper. But here's the part almost no one realizes. That paper is both a weapon and a weakness. A weapon because it gives them massive leverage. Billionaires can walk into banks and say, "I don't need cash, I'll just borrow against my stock." And the banks line up, offering low-interest loans backed by shares that everyone assumes will keep climbing in value. That's how the ultra-wealthy fund their lives. They don't sell stock unless they're forced to. They borrow against it, because borrowing is taxed differently. Selling creates capital gains. Borrowing doesn't. It's the quiet trick behind billionaire wealth. They get to unlock billions without paying taxes, while the average person cashing out a small stock portfolio still gets hit with a bill. But here's the weakness. When markets collapse, those loans get dangerous. A billionaire with billions in borrowed money suddenly faces a margin call. Shares fall. Lenders get nervous. Suddenly that untouchable wealth looks shaky. That's when we start to see fire sales. Billionaires dumping stock to cover debt. Billionaires selling yachts, cutting deals, calling in favors. And that's when the illusion breaks. But it's not just about debt. It's also about liquidity traps. Consider real estate. Billionaires often buy sprawling estates, penthouses, islands. These properties make their net worth soar on paper. But if they needed to sell tomorrow, how much could they really get? And how fast? Mansions don't sell overnight. Islands don't move quickly. That 100 million villa might be worth 50 million if they're desperate. And then there's art. Billionaires love rare art. Picassos, Basquiat's, Monet's. They hang them in mansions, display them in private galleries, even lock them in warehouses. But art is the slowest money of all. It's valuable, yes, but only when a collector is ready to pay the price. Until then, it's just paint on a canvas. So, strip away the illusion, and what do we find? Billionaire wealth is built on illiquid assets, fragile stock prices, and leveraged loans. The cash part, the money that's truly spendable right now, is shockingly small. And yet, that small percentage is enough. Because billionaires play a different game. They don't need $1 billion in cash to survive. They need just enough liquidity to keep the wheels turning. The jets fueled, the staff paid, the lawyers on call. The rest? It lives in a system that keeps growing, shifting, and protecting itself. Which brings us to the bigger question. If billionaires have so little liquid money, why does their power feel so untouchable? The answer is simple. Because power doesn't come from cash. It comes from control. If you walked into the life of a billionaire, you'd notice something strange. Their bank account might not hold billions, but their influence does. Because here's the secret. Billionaires don't need mountains of cash sitting idle. They only need enough to move the right levers. And those levers? They're not luxury cars or champagne parties. They're lawyers, lobbyists, politicians, media platforms, and networks of power that can be bought, funded, and sustained with a fraction of their wealth. Think about it. A billionaire doesn't need to hold $10 billion in cash to control a conversation. A few million in well-placed campaign donations can tilt an election. A few million more into think tanks and advocacy groups can shape the laws we all live under. That's the game. Cash isn't stored, cash is deployed. And it's deployed with surgical precision. Take politics. A regular citizen donates 50 to a candidate and hopes for change. A billionaire donates 5 million and gets a private dinner, a direct line, and a seat at the table when the laws are written. Or take media. Owning newspapers or TV stations is expensive, but influencing them? That can be done with targeted advertising buys, sponsorship deals, and quiet financial backing. It's not about having cash, it's about having just enough cash at the right time. Even philanthropy is part of this machine. We see billionaires cutting giant checks to universities, charities, global health funds. It looks like generosity, but it's also infrastructure. Every donation builds soft power. Every hospital wing named after them cements their legacy. Every scholarship fund buys influence over the brightest minds of the next generation. And here's the kicker. Most of this influence comes at a discount. Buying control is cheap compared to buying yachts. Steering culture is cheap at hoarding gold. The return on investment is enormous, not in dollars, but in authority. This is why billionaire cash reserves are smaller than people imagine, because they don't need vaults of money. The true wealth lies in assets that generate leverage: companies, stock, land, and in liquid cash that's aimed like a laser at influence. And yet, here's the paradox. The system only works as long as people believe in it. Believe the companies will keep growing. Believe the politicians will keep listening. Believe the donations mean generosity, not strategy. But when belief cracks, power cracks. We've seen glimpses of this already. Scandals where billionaires were exposed for buying influence behind the scenes. Backlashes against tech moguls who seemed untouchable. Entire fortunes wiped out when stock markets shifted overnight. Because cash may be small, but trust is even smaller. And once trust breaks, no amount of hidden liquidity can buy it back. So let's recap the paradox. Billionaires don't sit on piles of cash. Their wealth lives in assets, in investments, in paper. The actual cash? It's a weapon, a strategic tool, a spark that lights fires far larger than its size. And that leads us to the next question, the one most people never ask. If billionaire wealth is mostly an illusion of paper and power, what happens when the illusion fails? What happens when the markets crash, the banks get nervous, and the system that props up billionaire influence starts to wobble? History tells us that's when empires shake.